It's time for the Fifth Doctor's final story, The Caves of Androzani. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Season 21 Story 6, just dropped it, The Caves of Androzani, the final story to feature Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor and the penultimate story of the season, because John Nathan Turner decided that it was a good idea to introduce the new Doctor in the final story of the season instead of having audiences wait 10 months to see him in action at the start of the next season. However, this kind of causes a few problems. For starters, Peter Davison doesn't get a full final season as the Doctor, nor does Colin Baker get a full first season before his actual first season. It's only one story. Secondly, the story that they decided to open on for the Sixth Doctor was the Twin Dilemma, and yeah, I think more people would have been happy to wait 10 months between Caves of Androzani and Twin Dilemma than a week, and then wait 10 months between Twin Dilemma and Attack of the Cybermen. Yeah, Twin Dilemma was not the best way to open Colin Baker's era, but we'll get to that next time. But first, we got to wrap up Peter Davison. So how does the Caves of Androzani stand up? Brilliant. This is an absolutely brilliant story. Such a great story. For starters, every single character in this story is a villain. Every single character apart from the Doctor and Perry and a couple of companion cameos. But pretty much every character is either a villain or greedy or corrupt or working for someone who's evil, greedy or corrupt. I mean, you don't see anybody who isn't any of that. Although there are people, you just don't see them. They're the workers. The only people who are not like that are, as I said, the Fifth Doctor, who's not really that innocent anyway, and Perry, who is the only innocent character in the story, innocent of anything going on, as well as also a couple of companion companion chronicles, that's Big Finish, companion cameos in the regeneration scene. And besides that, and even then some of them are not quite as innocent as you might think, but besides that, pretty much most, if not all, of the supporting cast are villains or greedy or corrupt. The story is set on Androzani Minor, and it sees a couple of people kind of having a civil war over this sort of, I'm not sure it is a drug or or some sort of elixir or something, but something called Spectrox Tuxinium or something, and it helps people stay alive, stay looking quite young or younger than what they look like, such as the president. He is 88, but he looks 50-ish. And they're fighting over that. However, a man called Scarajek has pretty much, he's basically cut everybody off from the supply, and he's holding on to it, and he's using androids to fight anybody who comes tries to take it. So they're in a civil war. People of Androzani Minor are trying to get the Spectrox from Jack, who's holding on to it, and he's willing to give it up. He's actually willing to give it up. He's going to give it. He's prepared for everybody to have it, just so long as he has the head of the businessman Morgus, who, by the sounds of it, the other people don't want to do that. They don't really say why they haven't done it yet, but Jack will let them have it when he gets the head of Morgus. Morgus is a businessman, and once they went to get some Spectrox together, however, Morgus then betrayed Jack, and he got himself burnt, and his face has become disfigured. disfigured. And this then forces him to wear the mask that we see here. It's the iconic character in the iconic mask, and his I guess the whole costume is pretty much because of the burn. So yes, and it's because of that, Jack then decides to hold on to the Spectrox, and in exchange for giving it to everybody else, he will have Morgus's head. However, they don't seem to want to do that, as I mentioned. So there's a civil war, and everyone's getting a bit pissed off at the moment. And because they're really pissed off, then the Doctor and Perry get kind of caught up in the war by accident, after accidentally stepping in some raw Spectrox stuff, which is poisonous and deadly before it gets refined and becomes something that would help with the I guess it's sort of a drug. I suppose it's sort of a drug, but raw Spectrox would kill you, and very deadly. And the Doctor and Perry get some on them, and so it's a race against time as well. For the Doctor and Perry for the Doctor to find the cure, which is milk from the Queen Bat, and try and in order to rescue Perry. Meanwhile, Perry is kept as Jack's prize, as he likes beauty and he finds her very beautiful. This is after part 1, where they get caught by the military and then they get rescued by Jack. For some reason, Morgus wants them dead. Maybe he just thinks they're gun runners or something, like they were saying. But I don't know if that's fully explained or not. But maybe it was because he thought they were gun runners and just didn't like them and wanted them shot and got out of the way. But yeah, Morgus is a devilishly despicable and horrible character. Although Jack is probably the main villain of the story, Morgus is the actual main villain. He's the one who causes all the problems in the first place. If he hadn't betrayed Jack, then this whole war wouldn't have happened and he wouldn't be all in this situation. However, some of the deeds he does do throughout the story do kind of rebound on him when his secretary pretty much betrays him and informs the authorities about him, and he becomes the most wanted man after Jack. So, screw you, mate. And this is after he murders the president, as he believes the Doctor has been sent by the president as a way to, because he's also doing some dodgy dealings with the mercenaries who are doing some dealings with Jack. Yeah, there's a lot of cross and double crossing here. And I also love how he turns around to look at the camera like that in his chair and talk like a Shakespearean villain. He's talking. Let me demonstrate. So he's turning around like that. So he's talking to himself, but he's looking at the camera and sort of addressing the audience, whilst the Doctor and one of the gun runner people are on the screen in front of him, and he's turning away so he can talk to himself and the audience when not address, and then he can turn back and address the Doctor and the other guy. It's actually really good. It's a really good way. I think this was due to the actor not really being certain about the how he should deliver the lines or something, but I like how he did it. I like how it was handled. I also love Sharad Jack as a villain, but he's also a understandable, sympathetic villain in a way due to the story he had. He's also a mad character, but that gives the actor even more time to shine. He's fantastic at doing the mad Sharad Jack performance. And some of the other guys are good. This is one character who's got an android replica, and he's great in both characters. Although when he's with Jack, he seems like, oh, I'm happy to be with Jack, and then when he escapes, he's like, I'm fine being back here. Back in space. I don't actually know if that guy did die. I know his android duplicates did die eventually, or at least he sort of died and then came back at the end and then died afterwards. But I don't know if the human guy died. Probably. And it's all great. Also, this story has had some production problems, like Resurrection of the Daleks due to strike action. This caused two scenes to be cut. Along the scene at the start had to be redone or had to be altered, and had the Peter Davison and Eric O'Brien doing noticeably voiceovers, but you can't really see the characters moving their lips, even from a long distance. You can tell. And then the last scene that follows that was a sort of a reference to the deleted scene, and also a fight with the cave monster in part 4 was also cut, and you only get to see the Fifth Doctor going past the body, presumably after its attack in part 3, on the soldiers. And speaking of that monster, all the cliffhangers are brilliant. Part 1 with the supposed execution of the Doctor and Perry, and even before part 2 opens, you could probably tell they're androids, but it's still really cool. Though whatever happens to the picture whenever gunshots are fired, that sort of that sort of undermines the cliffhanger. I don't know what it is with these cameras. Anytime there's multiple gunshots, or even single gunshots, sometimes the picture goes a bit funny. I don't know what it is. This is the most notable example, but there have been quite a few over the past few years. Past decade and a half. So I don't know what it is with the cameras. Thankfully, it won't be as bad when we come to the new series. Much better cameras. Yeah, part 2 sees the Doctor hiding from the monster behind a rock during the middle of a fight with it. Pretty good suspenseful bit. And then part 3 is probably the best cliffhanger, with the Doctor nearly crashing the spaceship into Androzani Minor in an attempt to return to rescue Perry. And that is definitely brilliant. And of course, the final episode sees the regeneration, which we'll get to in a bit. But yeah, Caves of Androzani is a brilliant story. Some great characters, all of which are pretty nasty pieces of work in one way or another. And yeah, and I like how it's handled. Robert Holmes does a brilliant job. Robert Holmes is back for the first time since the Power of Crom, when he was going to do the 5 Doctors, originally titled the 6 Doctors, but that story didn't work out so good. And yeah, his version of the story wasn't quite as good as Terence Dix's. So thankfully we got Dix's version instead. Much better story. But Robert Holmes then came back for this story, and he would reuse a couple of his 6 Doctors story elements for the 2 Doctors, which will be his next script, next season. But yes, and I'm also glad that he got brought back. John Nathan Turner wanted to bring in a few more new writers for the earlier seasons, but I'm glad that he was able to bring back a few recurring writers, and even some old writers by this point. And Robert Holmes did a great job, and similarly, Graham Harper, I believe this is his directorial debut story on Doctor Who, I think, and he does an outstanding job. Both together are able to create one of the greatest stories of the time, and what many consider one of the greatest, if not the greatest story of all time. It's usually Genesis of the Daleks and this story, and maybe also Blink, maybe also Inferno, that are usually pitted against each other as the greatest story of all time. But it's generally usually this story or Genesis of the Daleks. More often Genesis, but if it's not that, then it's usually this one. Then possibly Blink, then maybe Inferno, and then maybe something else. But yeah, and you can see bloody why. This is an amazing story. It's so brilliant. And Robert Holmes, Graham Harper, and everyone working on it, even with some strike action causing some problems. They didn't have as much problems as with Resurrection of the Daleks, or with the problems that Warriors of the Deep had. It was none of those stories had any of the problems Shada had. But thankfully they managed to get through this story without having many problems getting in its way. Only 2 scenes were kind of interfered with, but quite a lot is handled brilliantly and done pretty well. The first episode can be doesn't have much going for it in the middle, but once you get into part 2, part 3, part 4, epic story. Again, part 3 also doesn't have a huge amount going in the middle, but still handled pretty brilliantly for what is there, and this still proves to be a great story. And yeah, and the final 7, let's just say the final 10 minutes. The final 10 minutes is epic, with Jack and Morgus fighting each other with one of the gun runs. By the way, the gun runner kills his 2 surviving associates, and then before he shoots Jack as well, and then the android version of the guy Jack kidnapped, he comes back and kills the gun runner. Jack manages to kill Morgus, and then he dies in the android's arms, and the android also dies after being in the battle earlier on. And then the Fifth Doctor comes in and rescues Peri after getting the bat's milk, and is able to take her to the TARDIS just before the caves erupt through via some mud lava things. Yeah, that's another thing. Nature in this story is also against our characters, especially at the end. Eventually, the Doctor and Peri make it back to the TARDIS. Both Peri is almost dead, and the Doctor himself is dying. But they manage to get back to the TARDIS. They're fine. The Doctor gives Peri the bat's milk, and she's safe. She's fine. She's alive. Everything's going to be fine for her. The same cannot be said for the Doctor, who only had enough bat's milk for Peri and had to sacrifice himself to save her. And to be honest, part 4 of this story possibly sees the Doctor at his most heroic ever in the show. This is possibly the Doctor at his most heroic ever. And you can't blame him. He's having to avoid being shot by gun runners. He's trying to avoid these natural events, and he's trying to find this Queen Bat, trying to find the milk, get back, avoid being caught up in the war, and trying to time these natural events. And he's got to rescue the one person who's innocent in all of this story. One person, his only proper friend, who is only really just known, unless you if you consider those several Big Finish audios with the Fifth Doctor Peri, and for the majority of them also Erimem. But yeah, maybe they should have done that with the Sixth Doctor, because that continuity was a bit questionable, because they are travelling together for a good couple of years. Yeah, just the first couple of ones with them, 2 of them on their own, that would have made sense, but then they go and introduce Erimem, and things start to get a bit more complicated. But the beauty of when the original TV story aired before Big Finish and other expanded media continuity is that the Doctor really only knew Peri for a short amount of time. At this point, of course, like I said, expanded media has extended to that time. In Big Finish's case, a good couple of years, and several adventures, including a new companion joining them for most of them. But in the original TV story's case, the Fifth Doctor has really only known Peri for one adventure before this story. So he's basically only knows her. He's only known her for a few days, possibly, not very long. And she's someone he's only just met, but he's still going out there. She's his companion, she's his friend, and she's an innocent person. So he's going out there to rescue her, and that is the beauty of it. It probably wouldn't be as interesting if it was someone he knew for a bit longer, although that would show him to be a very compassionate character and very caring of his friends. But this is someone, or at least in the TV continuity, this is someone he's only just met. So it actually makes him even more heroic. So, yeah, so the expanded media continuity with more than a small number of adventures between the 2 television stories, that's pushing it a little bit. If Caves of Androzani was the last story of the season, and there was another Fifth Doctor Peri story as the 6th story, and then Caves was 7th, then, yeah, that's fine. That's absolutely fair. That's fine. And it will still make the Doctor really heroic. But considering this is a very short continuity gap, it's a very wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey, fiddly stuff. But in the original, in the TV timeline, this is how you do a hero. This is how you do the Doctor. This is how you do a heroic Doctor. This is absolutely perfect. He's going out. This counts the expanded media timeline. This is a person he's only just met recently, and he's still going out to save her. And to quote Mr. TARDIS Reviews, why? Because it's the right thing to do. So that's why episode 4 of this story sees the Doctor at his most heroic ever. He's going out to save his friend, who in TV continuity he's only known for a short period of time. Yes, in expanded media continuity it's been longer, but it doesn't have the same effect. But here in TV continuity it works beautifully. Even if there was another story in between, it would still work beautifully. I'm not bashing the expanded media, by the way. There's several great stories there, and I love the character of Erimem, but I'm just saying, in this short time period, it's very tight. It's very tight, and sort of does undermine Caves of Androzani's the Doctor's sacrifice in this story. But if we're following TV continuity, then it's not really a huge amount of a problem. It's something you can overlook and just focus on it, and comes to a brilliant climax. Although the camera does seem a bit more focused on Nicola Bryant's cleavage than Peter Davison dying on the floor. But yeah, even Davison himself has commented on this. But the scene itself is still really brilliant, and I love the camera movements when it's going in onto the Doctor, and then when it's coming back out after the regeneration on Colin, then back the wider shot with him and Nicola Bryant, and then coming closer into Colin's face for the final shot of the episode. It's brilliantly done. The visual effects for the regeneration itself, I'm not the biggest fan of, but it is really effective, and the Doctor is on a point where he may not survive this one if he's not careful, so it does make a lot of sense that it is a bit more of a tricky regeneration, and which also explains some of his mannerisms in the next incarnation, although we'll get round to that with Twin Dilemma. And of course we get brand new cameos from former Fifth Doctor companions Tegan, Turlough, Chameleon, somehow. Okay. I suppose it's the same thing as Adric, but although I also can't really tell it's Chameleon, it's difficult to see. Nyssa and then Adric, and the Fifth Doctor's final word is actually Adric, as he can see him. And these sort of, I guess, in his head, what his companions of the Fifth Doctor would say to him if he was dying, and they tried to convince him to survive. And then the best cameo, the Master, Anthony Lee's final performance as the Master until next season, because Planet of Fire was supposed to kill off the Master, and this cameo, as I've mentioned a few reviews ago, would have been set before Planet of Fire in the Master's continuity, or as I mentioned, it might be what the Fifth Doctor is thinking in his head, what the Master would say. And also the Master sort of does have an influence over the Fifth Doctor and Fifth Doctor into Sixth Doctor regeneration, similar sort of how he does with the Fourth Doctor into Fifth Doctor's one, but not a direct one. It's not physically being there anyway. Maybe direct, but mentally rather than physically. And so, yeah, and of course, the Master would return for Season 22's third story, The Mark of the Rani, as well as also Trial of the Time Lords, namely Ultimate Foe, and Survival, before returning in the TV movie, and of course, the new series, a few episodes of. So, yeah, so thankfully the Master was not killed in the last story, and he gets to have an epic cameo here. The best Master cameo ever. Possibly the best cameo of this story. Possibly one of the best cameos ever. After Tom Baker and Day of the Doctor, it might be the second best. But yeah, and he's sort of convincing. He's trying to tell the Doctor to die, but he sort of accidentally convinces him to survive. So as Mr. TARDIS reviews, the Master turns up and pretty much convinces the Doctor to regenerate, as there's still evil out there in the universe. Especially as the Master is not dead, as we'll find out in Mark of the Rani. And so the Doctor, this gives the Doctor the push to regenerate into his sixth incarnation, and we end the story on the post-regeneration scene. Although, the first lines of the Sixth Doctor, note my mum's not a fan of those lines. She's not really a big fan of Colin Baker's Doctor, full stop. She's really not a fan of that first line of his. But yeah, that first line, that sets up the tone and the personality of the Sixth Doctor really well before we even get into the story. But it's a nice first scene for the Sixth Doctor, at least as far as his personality is concerned, tying in. But yeah, that was great. Not sure why they decided to do this, but they then have the Sixth Doctor have the face in the end title sequence, and then is credited first. This never happens again, nor has ever happened before, apart from in Day of the Doctor, where, of course, Matt Smith, David Tennant, and Christopher Eccleston had to be put on top, had to be first three billing, then John Hurt, even though John Hurt regenerated in that story. But That story has the Doctors in order of incarnation, going backwards from Matt Smith to William Hartnell, and it's technically Matt Smith's. It's a Matt Smith story. So apart from that, and also multiple Doctor stories where, well, and also Twice Upon a Time, Peter Capaldi being above David Bradley. Jodie Whittaker's not above Peter Capaldi, but Capaldi's above David Bradley. He's a later incarnation, but again, that's Peter Capaldi's final story. So, so Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi are allowed to go above John Hurt and David Bradley, even if they're later incarnations. Even if Hurt regenerates in that story, and Bradley also sort of regenerates. Well, William Hartnell actually sort of regenerates into Patrick Troughton via stock footage from the 10th Planet. Though Whittaker does have the last credit, so Capaldi still gets first billing on that. See, besides Day of the Doctor, this is the only time a newer incarnation has gotten the top billing of a Doctor regenerating. But like I said, Day of the Doctor's credits are going in order backwards from Matt Smith to William Hartnell, so John Hurt gets fourth billing either whether he regenerates or not at the end of that story, and Christopher Eccleston would get third billing for the same reasons. So this is the only time we see an incoming Doctor credited above the outgoing Doctor in the outgoing Doctor's regeneration scene. And also got another example. Deep Breath sees the outgoing Doctor have a cameo at the end in the incoming Doctor's first story, but it makes sense for the incoming Doctor to have the first credit because that's his first story, and then the outgoing Doctor can have the credit at the end of the main credits, similar, and they sort of have swapped after the regeneration story. So that's a nice way of doing that. But I don't know why, but Colin Baker was credited above Peter Davison here. It makes a nice transition into the shot, although Colin Baker's face in Peter Davison titles doesn't quite work, and I can see why they changed them. I can see why they changed them for the next story, because Peter Davison's face in the Tom Baker season 18 Tom Baker titles, it worked better than Tom Baker's face, but Colin Baker's face is still a little bit awkward, especially the shots that the one they had. I think they changed the face as well for his actual titles. So yeah, I can see why they changed them a little bit visually for the Sixth Doctor's titles. The audio's not, the music doesn't change a huge amount. It's very similar until season 23, where it's completely changed. I like how the Delia Derbyshire theme had some slight alterations or remixes whenever there was a new title sequence appearing for Doctors 1 to 4 up to Shada. So overall, the Caves of Androzani is a epic story. This is an amazing, epic story, and a fantastic way for Peter Davison to leave the show, where he has his main regular incumbent incarnation story. Of course, he would be back for Dimensions in Time, Time Crash, and although via stock footage, he still gets credited for Day of the Doctor, plus expanded media such as Big Finish Audios, a couple of other shorts, maybe like 5-ish Doctor reboots, and I expect he'll probably have an appearance in some upcoming Fifth Doctor Blu-ray trailers. He did in the season 19 one. So on the whole, Caves of Androzani, outstanding, and I loved every single character in it. Loved/hate, and loved all the acting. Brilliant. And I also liked Perry a bit more in this story. I found her a bit annoying in the last one for the first half of the story, but I think she's found her feet already here. And yeah, another thing with the two together would have been, if there was another story with the two, it would have built on their relationship a bit more before the Doctor regenerated, a bit like the 11 Clara relationship before he turned into 12, or the Rose 9 relationship before he turned into 10. Even like the 1 Ben and Polly relationship before he turned into 2. There's a few other examples, but I won't go through all of them. It does take a lot of time. So on the whole, Caves of Androzani, brilliant, and yeah, that's really all I can say. It's absolutely brilliant. I'm going to be giving this story a well-deserved 10 out of 10. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to Peter Davison. You were fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And you know what? So was your Doctor. I'm trying to do an impression. I'm trying to do the scene from the end of Parting of the Ways, I'm going to try and do that for future Doctor outings that say that they're fantastic, and so does their doctors. But yeah, but thank you to Peter Davison. Thank you for being the Fifth Doctor. You were amazing, and we're gonna miss you. We're gonna miss you just like I'm gonna miss you just as much as I miss William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton, John Pertwee, Tom Baker, and how much I'm gonna miss. And I'm going to miss you as much as I'm going to miss Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann, John Hurt, Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, and when she leaves, Jodie Whittaker. I'm kind of missing her already, and she's still the incumbent incarnation. So, yeah. Thank you, Peter Davison, and that's it from the Fifth Doctor. We'll just do the ranking, and then we'll go on to the first Sixth Doctor story, which, due to JNT decision-making, is the last story of this season. And yeah, I would get excited for Colin Baker's. I would get excited for the Sixth Doctor if he has started with season 22. If we had skipped if the next story had never existed and we started straight with Attack of the Cybermen, or a much better post-regeneration story. But there's one little major roadblock in the way of me getting excited for Colin Baker and the Sixth Doctor, and it's a little story called The Twin Dilemma. But once we get past this, then I will be excited for Colin Baker and the Sixth Doctor, and especially for season 22. I actually really like season 22. I know it's a very unpopular season, but I personally really like that. I love that season. So I will be getting excited for the new Doctor and the actor playing him. But first, we got to get past a little story called The Twin Dilemma before I can get excited, because I expect I'm going to rip into this story. I'm going to rip this story to shreds in my review, I expect. This is the worst story of all time, as far as many people are concerned. And yeah, I think I'm going to be... whilst I won't consider this one as bad as Space Pirates, at least not yet, I may be ripping it to shreds. So, yeah, unless maybe I do like on a rewatch, perhaps. I mean, anything's possible. But most likely what's going to happen, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to say that, and I'm going to turn out and like it, aren't I? It's happened before. But I'm going to say it anyway, in case that doesn't happen, and it turns out just as bad, if not worse, or only a little bit better. So tune in next time where I rip the Twin Dilemma to shreds. Possibly. Anyway, so that's it from me. Thank you for watching. Tune in for the Fifth Doctor Top 10 story ranking, and then my review of the Twin Dilemma, and then Season 21 ranking. And I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. For starters, Peter Davison does not get a final full season, final season as for starters, Peter Davison doesn't get a final. For starters, Peter Davison doesn't get a full final. Stop burping. Who, by the sounds of it, the humans don't really want to give up. As the other people, I mean... Excuse me. I really like, but that's you could probably guess that they're androids before Part 2's resolution. Part 2 before Part. It's this. This is usually it's usually And to be honest, part 4 of this story possibly sees the Doctor at his most heroic ever. Fuck, I'm doing that again. So it actually makes him even more heroic. So that's why the 5th Doctor is, well, in this case, yeah, of course we get brand new cameos of our returning characters. There's a returning and at least 2 more season and 2 more stories in the classic season are. So yeah, this is the only, but besides Dave the Doctor, this is the only time a later incarnate, in Dave the Doctor. But as I mentioned in Dave the Doctor, it's going in order from Matt Smith to William Hart. It's going, but like I said, Dave the Doctor is going backward. But like I said, Dave the Doctor is going in order of Dockward. Ah! And Christopher Eccleston will get billing for the 3rd scene, and Christopher Eccleston will get same situation. So yeah, this is the only time a new Doctor has been Doctor who we see at the very end of the episode. So this is the only time we see a new Doctor be credited above the outgo. But a little altered to tell that it's a different title sequence, like how the Delia Derbyshire one gets changed every other couple of new title sequences. Like how the Delia Derbyshire title sequence, but on the whole, and also the not so much with other companions, because and Peter Davison, you were fantastic, absolutely fantastic, and you know what? So were you. Yeah. So thank you, and you know what? So was your Doctor, and go away. On next time, tune in for my rip/rant. And